Welcome to The Conversation, a Falmouth Community Television show where my fantastic co-host, the Reverend Will Mebane, and I, Onjalé Price, facilitate conversations with members of our community on various topics around race. Our hope is that these conversations don't just stay here. Our hope is that our conversations continue in your home, in your community, wherever you're watching from, with your family and with your friends. So as we're in the midst of this holiday season, we felt it was appropriate to talk about Thanksgiving and the Indigenous peoples. So to start us off, we're going to hear from a few people on the street with their thoughts around Thanksgiving and Indigenous peoples.
So I think that neither Thanksgiving or Columbus Day are inherently racist, but it's important that we focus on how we recognize those days and celebrate those days. I think that Columbus Day in itself is problematic based on historical evidence. Columbus was not a great person. He also didn't discover anything, contrary to the romanticized narrative that we continue to tell. You can't discover anything that's art that already has people there. And Thanksgiving, I don't see anything wrong with sitting down with friends and family and having dinner, but it's important that we discontinue the narrative of that the Pilgrims and the Natives sat down and everything was, a great time, because we now know that it wasn't necessarily that smooth and things didn't go that way.
Because I think that oftentimes white Americans tend to, when we talk about colonialism, we tend to think about what we consider to be kind of like our humble roots, but we don't pay enough attention to how complex colonialism is and was. And to celebrate those roots without acknowledging the pain that colonialism caused to indigenous communities that were already here, and without considering the ways in which those celebrations exclude non-white Americans in their most traditional sense, I think that's irresponsible and that we can do better.
Welcome back. We just heard from our people on the street. But before we jump into conversation about specifically what those people said, I want to pose a question to our panelists to make sure that we are being inclusive and respectful as we move forward. So I know there is a lot of discussion, maybe perhaps controversy around different words or terms that are used to describe people. And I'm reading a book that describes the Wampanoags as Indians, but I also know some people don't prefer that term. They may prefer Native or Indigenous. So before we get started, I'd like to just ask all the panelists, I'll introduce you and just let me know how you feel about those words and what you prefer we use tonight. So Jerry, I'll start with you. Jerry Lassos, you're a member of the Tongva tribe, hailing from Los Angeles. You have a master's in secondary education from University of Colorado, and you've been a teacher for, seems like a really long time, over 30 years. And you just moved to East Falmouth, so welcome to the community. We're glad to have you. So tell me a little bit about how you feel about the different terms used to describe Indigenous people.
Well, I appreciate the welcome. Thank you. I prefer, I believe, Indigenous, because it's a little more inclusive of the different cultures that fall in that category. So Indigenous for me.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. And Talia, you are from Mashpee, and you attended Quinnipiac University. I hope I said that correctly, majoring in communication. And you previously worked for the Wampanoag tribe here, Historic Preservation Department, and then as the executive assistant to the vice chair. And you were also one of the filmmakers of the amazing documentary Mashpee 9, which I suggest everyone who's watching this should also go watch. And you currently work for Mashpee TV as the as the
productions manager.
production manager. I apologize. I didn't write that down. So could you tell me a little bit about how you feel about the different words to describe Indigenous people?
Oh, yeah. Well, hi, and thank you for having me, and thanks for asking that question. I don't think a lot of people put that into consideration. For me, I definitely don't prefer any use of the word Indian, but I do, like Jerry was saying, appreciate Indigenous more, but I tend to use Native more, just within, you know, my profession and stuff like that, either trying to describe Natives and non-Natives and such. So Natives or Indigenous, both are good with me.
Okay, thank you. And Julie Vanderhoop, you grew up in Aquinnah on Martha's Vineyard, a member of the Aquinnah Wampanoag tribe. And I believe you left the island for a while to be a commercial pilot, which is super cool. And you're back on the island now with your family, and you're the founder and owner of Orange Peel Bakery on Martha's Vineyard, which I'm sure you're very busy this time of year. So if you wouldn't mind telling me about your preferred language for Indigenous people.
I think I agree with Talia. I am both. I use Indigenous just because I agree with Jerry, and it is all inclusive, as well as Native to bring a focus toward the Native American side of things. So,
okay.
But no offense taken, just as long as people are thinking about the right, you know, us in a positive focus.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you all for that. I will do my best to use Indigenous and Native through our conversation and moving forward. So the first question that we posed to our people on the street was, do you see racism in the celebration of Columbus Day and Thanksgiving? So I'd like to ask my panelists, do you see racism in the celebration of Columbus Day and Thanksgiving? Anyone's welcome to get started.
Say that one more time.
Yeah, do you see racism in the celebration of Columbus Day and or Thanksgiving?
Well, I can start. Personally, I don't see, it's kind of, personally, I don't see the racism as much in Thanksgiving, even though it can be looked at, but there is definitely more racism in Columbus Day. So I do see racism portrayed in Columbus Day much rather than Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, I think it's more just like a fabricated myth, or it's turned into an Americanized holiday. It's not historically accurate or culturally accurate. So I don't think it's racist. It's more just kind of took something from our culture and turned it into, put it into American culture. And as long as it's looked at as that way and not looked at as the fabricated myth that is being taught in some schools, then I don't think it's racist.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I do think there's definitely cause for concern of people believing that the Thanksgiving myth is actually what happened and not just using it as a tool for being able to talk about Indigenous people and their relationship to the colonists when they arrived. Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, the depiction of the first Thanksgiving, and there's a stereotypical perspective, and the inaccuracies are concerning. For example, the mixing of cultural elements. So children are, you know, asked to draw pictures of teepees and things like that. And there's that generalization that all Native Americans live in teepees, or all Native Americans are the same. And I think that doesn't do, it does a disservice to the over 570 tribes that exist. So hopefully we're working towards getting beyond that kind of depiction. And as far as Columbus, you know, the inaccuracies, well, and I'm old enough to have remember being taught about the discovery of America and proving the world was round and landing in the place that he was seeking, which was India, and therefore naming the people Indians. You know, he has become a symbol of the oppressor, the whole goal of gold, glory, God. And, you know, unfortunately, he has a legacy of the colonization, genocide, the historical trauma that has resulted since. But I think things have been changing slowly, and we're on the right track because I don't know how you correct 400 years of inaccuracy, but the celebration of Indigenous Peoples Day is a very good start. I find as an educator that the Massachusetts Chronicles can be a very good resource, especially if it's embedded into the curriculum so kids really see a Native perspective on an ongoing basis. And then, as the Reverend mentioned, the events that happened in 2020, the awakening to equality and social justice and those kinds of things. And then programs like this are very important to have those sometimes difficult conversations. So the trend is good and it's hopeful, I think, for all of us. As far as Thanksgiving, I think the whole idea of self-determination for individual tribes and Indigenous people as a whole, the focus on elders and the keepers of the history and the culture is very important. Language revitalization, all of those efforts, and hopefully with this newfound awakening, there'll be a lot more understanding and support for those kinds of efforts locally and across the nation. So it's a good trend.
Yeah, I'm glad you think so. Sometimes I feel that way also. And Julie, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I certainly do. Especially, well, we'll start with Columbus Day. And I just think that that is wound up with so many misconceptions that it's founded in way too many myths over truths. And I do not want to celebrate, Columbus Day because the truths are hard to hear. And, if we're going to celebrate, then it shouldn't be false. And we have to celebrate real heroes. And I'm sure there are many better ones. And this has gone on for far too long. And this is all part of the change that we want to see and why we are here to discuss this. And Thanksgiving is the same thing. I cannot tell you how many people I know that do not even recognize the people that were here on the shore, living here, and who supported the colonists as they came into our lands. It's very hard for me to say, happy Thanksgiving. I don't. I say happy holiday. So it is a holiday that we gather on, and that is so much better for myself. And although I have members of my family that haven't come to this point, come to that turn, and keep on using this, we can all be thankful, but we need to be thankful every day. So, these are the reminders, that I have for people.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Reverend Will, what are you thinking about over there in the corner?
Well, first of all, I'm just delighted, thrilled to be in your presence. And I mean that very sincerely. You're already teaching me, and I'm hoping to learn more from Jerry and Julie and Talia today. And already I have stopped using, I stopped using Indian a long time ago. So at some point I had an epiphany, an awakening that that was just not proper. So I appreciate you confirming that Native or Indigenous is much more appropriate than Indian. I'm going to ask you I think a very simple question first to continue my education, and then I'll follow up. So is there a Native holiday that is similar to Thanksgiving? was Thanksgiving an appropriation of an indigenous holiday that existed, or an indigenous celebration that existed prior to how we understand Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Tell me more, Julie.
Well, we have our it was a Cranberry Day for us. The second Tuesday in October is a day that we all gather. And we're gathering with respect and thoughts to our ancestors who would go down and bring in our last harvest. The cranberries were really important to our people because they gave us sustenance because of the way that they kept. We put them in so many of our foods, and they carried us through the winter. The crop was a late growing crop, and so we would go down to our bogs and we would pick in tent down there for weeks at a time to bring in bushels of these cranberries. And I believe that it really sustained our people. So we get together, and this is a celebration for all. And normally in normal years, we would gather with the entire community for a potlatch. And it's just wonderful. Also the drumming, singing, dancing, and bringing in our celebration of the harvest.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that is that's just a common thing. I think that natives and especially Eastern Woodlanders had specific times of year that we were being thankful for certain harvests. Like around this time, it would be cranberry, but it would be a lot sooner, like Julie was saying, in October. So, and even when like the spring comes around, we have strawberries and we have that welcoming of the herring, and it's kind of our new year. That can be looked at as some sort of a Thanksgiving. So I think the concept of Thanksgiving, being grateful for the bountiful harvest, or just in celebrating amongst family and friends, I do think, that did come from the native culture, and it is appropriate as far as that, but it was obviously celebrated a bit different, and we definitely aren't thankful just one day a year. And I think that's the overall point that we carry within ourselves when it comes to around Thanksgiving time. I think, and that's kind of bothersome as well, is that there's only one day, I guess, for America to be thankful, when as Native people, we're thankful every day. And especially during the changes of seasons and stuff, we have specific things that we're thankful for that upcoming season, or what we're preparing for, and so on and so forth. But I think the Thanksgiving, like you were saying with the cranberries and stuff, it was maybe probably a lot bigger because we had all of the summer and, the fall and the big harvest of the fall to prepare for the cold winter. And so we had an abundance of things. And then we would also just come together, play games. It would be a time for elders to share stories with the youth as, their parents were making clothes for the winter, and so on and so forth.
Very well put, both of you, and so similar. With my tribe and the other tribes of Southern California, we celebrate what we call Moonpitum, and it's a gathering and a celebration related to harvest and the sharing amongst the cultures, the similarities and the beliefs, and the passing on of culture, language, joy, thankfulness, gratitude for surviving a season and looking forward and supporting each other, as of course the seasons aren't as brutal in Southern California, but yes, that just celebration of being together, of surviving, of passing on heritage to our youth.
So Talia, I appreciate what each of you has said. I just want to comment on what you said about Americans having one day of the year when they focus specifically on giving thanks. In my tradition, which is the Christian tradition, we say that we should give thanks always, that the divine expects us to give thanks always, with each, not just with each day, but with each moment that we are breathing and living. And I try to subscribe to that. And maybe it's because I have some indigenous heritage. My mom from North Carolina had her great grandmother, if I'm remembering correctly, was of the Cherokee Nation. So there's some native blood in me as well. I want to go back to the comments that were made by our folks on the street. As one of them said, and this may be, I think I heard a little different opinion from our panelists today. So love you to weigh in more on this, that Thanksgiving per se is itself is not racist. It's not a racist holiday. But what's happened is how it has been misappropriated, as we were just talking about. The celebrations have been misappropriated. And the narrative has just become so romanticized, right? That there's this teaching that I had as a child that it was just a great big old party. And the natives and the pilgrims just sat down and they just had a big fun time and to celebrate their cooperation, their collaboration with one another. So, Julie, I heard you say that you don't say Happy Thanksgiving, and it's not a holiday that you and others don't celebrate. But I thought I heard Talia and Jerry saying, well, there's nothing inherently racist about it. So say more if you would. Let's start with you, Julie, about why you feel it's not to be a celebrator for you, Thanksgiving.
I think that, just because really here, a lot of what I do is spread who I am through what I do. My bakery, the outside, it has a wood-fired outside oven. And I tell people every day that, this is why we come here. It's not, some people come because they want to see the stars. They want to see Robert Redford or Michael J. Fox or somebody else. But I said, for me, waking up and going to this oven, which is outside, and I can see the sunrise on the left side, and I can see the moon's rise on the right side that evening. And it takes away the weight of my work, which often is long and hard. But I am thankful to be where I am at that moment. And the example of where I'm standing is a reminder to everyone, which is a very special place for my people. It's called Black Brook. And through the water in the springs that run to this property and the smoke, it's said that our ancestors are close. And so I am honored to be here, to own what I do, and to do good work. My bakery is also run on an honor system, which even as people came in today and they couldn't get their phones to send money through a cash app, I said, go, and when you get into service, send it back, because it's an honor system stand, and the honor is that I'm trusting you. I want to share my world with people, and I've been lucky enough to do this for 14 years. From a point where my son said, well, what if we come home and there's nothing? There's all of the day's work is gone and we don't have anything. And I said, every day we try and we'll get up and we'll do it again, because that's who we are. And without that type of thought, we would not be here. So this is, and I honestly believe that, the 14 years that I've worked from this 12 by 16 foot bakery, we have won acknowledgement from around the world, because it's very unique, but that's who we are. And I'm trying to lead from it. We bakers are not wealthy people. They're just hard workers and hopefully happy. But I have to give something to my community every day, and this is how I do it. And it has worked for me, and I've found that it gives me a lot to live off of wellness.
That was very profound comments there, Julie. Thank you. Let me ask Talia and Jerry. You having a big Thanksgiving feast? Are you going to enjoy some turkey and trimmings, or what are you going to do on Thanksgiving?
Well, personally, this year, I'm actually fasting the day of Thanksgiving until the sun sets or goes down, and then I will be able to eat. But I think each year it's depending on like what either I've been through that year or what I've learned or what I've had to overcome that I choose of how I'm going to celebrate this Americanized holiday. Because like I said before, I don't necessarily might not see it as racist, but it's still not culturally appropriate to myself. So it's not something that, I'm always gung-ho about, and I don't go around saying happy Thanksgiving, but it is something that I can appreciate America at least trying and starting somewhere to be thankful for something. It does get a little bit misconstrued, I guess, because when we're only being thankful one day of the year, we're forgetting what to be thankful for every day. And it seems like you end up being thankful for the abundance of things or, little or bigger things rather than the little things. So I guess that's the way that I look at it or portray it. So it's always depending on like how I feel and where my roots or my bloods are making me feel like. And this year it just with it being like everybody is like the hoopla about 400 years since the Mayflower and stuff like that, and it's very somber for me, and it's hard. I think it's hard to get through because we still remember, we still carry that trauma, and we still feel things that we don't know why, or we don't know where they came from, or necessarily, but we just feel them. And being a Native person in America, it's so hard, and just growing through that intergenerational trauma and growing, like some years I'm just so mad at Thanksgiving, other years I don't care, and then it's difficult. It's very difficult, and I think it's important for America to know that too, and to just acknowledge that even if you appreciate Native Americans and what they have done for you to even be here on American soil and to create this country that has been created, that we're still dealing with things, and we still have to sit there and either pick and choose what we adopt from the American culture, because this is our land. Like we don't have anywhere to go home to, like European colonizers and stuff. Like this is our homeland. So when you came, or when the colonizers came and created a whole new American culture and had us be assimilated into that, now we have to differentiate at the same time with carrying our ancestors and their traumas and becoming whole and being okay. So if we can just get to that understanding, then I think the racist part of any part of Thanksgiving could be a little bit died down, and we could just appreciate each other more and just be more understanding.
Well said. Wow. Well said. You mentioned the trauma, and that resonated with me as a African-American male. I was remembering that just recently, the American Medical Association now identifies, racism as a coded condition. By that I mean it can now, physicians now are going to be asked to treat racism, treat the trauma that BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color experience, which is a major step forward, I think, in recognizing what you were sharing, Talia, about the trauma, because again, as a Black male, I carry it with me on a literally daily basis, if not hourly basis. So thank you for that. Jerry, what A big plate of leftovers for you from Thanksgiving?
Nope, not this year, and it's primarily because of the pandemic. We're out here because my daughter is close by, but I think this year we've agreed to, we're going to just stay within our homes. Usually it's a pretty big celebration, but more so for the gathering and not so much for the tradition of Thanksgiving. If I could touch upon a couple of things, I think Julie put it so well, and that is the idea of place. I think most of us really feel grounded and feel very much a part of the big picture when we think of place, not only geographical place, but our place within history, our place within our people, our place within our families. And you did a beautiful job talking about how important it is for you to do what you do, Julie. And I think that speaks to that idea of place. You're doing something that's very fulfilling because it contributes to not only our past, our present, but also our future. And as far as, the historical trauma, Rev and Talia, you've both put it, it's within us. It's how deep that is. I mean, it affected our communities, our tribes, our people, our families, but we carry it with us every day. And I think that kind of deep pain and suffering, we need to go through the healing process. We need to bring our youth to understand that it's a part of who they are, but they can rise above it. They can achieve whatever they believe they can achieve, and we need to do all we can to support them. But we are survivors. We are here, and we will be here for the long term as well. And hopefully our future is just as bright as anyone else's, if not more so.
Well, again, I resonate so deeply with what you've shared, Jerry. I say all the time that all of the social ills that exist in my community, in the Black community, whether it be dysfunctional families or
Yes.
addiction or poverty or whatever, can be traced all the way back to the transatlantic slave trade. Goes all the way back to that. That didn't just happen. It's the result of the trauma that a community of people had to endure and are still enduring. So I'm going to give Angie a chance to get in, because I'm sure she's chomping at the bit here, and maybe want to go to our next question. But Angie, I hand it off to you.
No, that was listening to all of you speak is really puts me in a place to really reflect a lot more, reflect on the land that I'm on. I'm on unceded territory in East Falmouth, and to reflect on where my place is amongst the culture of the Indigenous people here. So I don't necessarily have anything specifically to comment on what you all said. I'm just still thinking about it and taking it in, and appreciating what you say. I do have a question that I thought about, Talia, when you were talking about sometimes Thanksgiving, you're just like really angry about the whole idea. And I'm wondering, do you, Talia, or any of you ever participate in a day of mourning? And could you talk a little bit about what that is, and if you do or don't celebrate it, why or why not?
I guess I can start. I actually have been trying to make it a point to get down to Plymouth for the National Day of Mourning, but I haven't yet. So I can't comment necessarily on the Plymouth celebrations, but I've definitely practiced the Day of Mourning, and I've done so here in Mashpee, whether it be, in my own backyard or on 55 and on our traditional ceremonial lands that is on our reservation. And I know, at least experiencing it with other people, within Mashpee, it's a very humbling experience, and it's so comfortable, and it takes away that anger, and it doesn't turn it into sadness. It kind of turns it into more of a gratitude and humbleness that we're here, because even just I mean, looking in the mirror every day is amazing, but looking at, you know, other tribal members and just being on the same land, like that resonates so much within us. And I think coming together on that day specifically and choosing it to mourn together and to at the same time laugh together and share stories and either break bread or not and just be around the fire, it's so comforting, and it's important. And I think it's important in any Native person's life to at least experience it once, or try, and especially if they're confused about how to handle Thanksgiving, because I think that was the first time that I ever, you know, participated in it, was when I was, like you said, like I was at a point where like I've been angry for so long and I just didn't know how to handle it, because even in like my family, we're very modernized. They're very modernized. They're not as traditional. So I learned more of my traditional ways through my mentors and stuff through the tribe. So like Jerry was saying, it's so important for us to acknowledge the youth and teach them and bring them in, because there's certain things that they're going through that they can't understand and that they're angry about. And if we give them that sort of like option, then it might be a way for them to release it. And that's what National Day of Mourning did for me, at least within my own territory. But I hope someone could speak about Plymouth, because I hear a lot of good things, at least in the recent years, and how it actually transformed from when it originated to now.
So thinking about something that Reverend Will said about us as Black people carrying certain traumas as well, I wonder what something like a National Day of Mourning would do for the Black community. Now, the Black community, very much like the Indigenous and Native groups, are very, very diverse. I think there's another common misconception that all Native people are pretty much the same. All Indigenous groups live the same way before the colonizers arrived and still live the same way, you know, from Los Angeles to Massachusetts. And we know that's not correct. And I think in the same way, Black people get put in the same bubble. Like Black people in the South act just like Black people in the Midwest and so on. So I wonder what that would do for either pockets of Black people in different parts of the country, or Black people as a whole community. It might be something for us to try as well, if we could kind of get some of our mourning and our anger out in that way.
I think it's a very good suggestion, a National Day of Mourning, healing, you know, because we still carry so many open wounds. Reverend, you mentioned it, so many of us, and now even immigrants come, you know, and the way they're treated. There really needs to be healing. I was very hopeful that at the turn of the millennium, we might be able to turn a page, you know, and say, let's move forward and leave some of these things in the past, racism and hatred and bias and those kinds of things. So maybe that a call for a National Day of Mourning, and possibly even another day, a National Day of Healing, so that we can begin that process to leave some of these things in the past, because we face many challenges in the future, and one of them is going to have to be to coexist and to have a deeper level of understanding of all cultures.
And can I add?
Yeah,
to
Julie, I see
Absolutely.
you. I see you wanting to get in there. Come on.
I do.
Please.
I just wanted to say that here on the Vineyard, we've been recognizing this movement. A lot of people have come to unite, and today was actually the last of our gatherings, and we've been kneeling in a public space that's been offered up, and we've been kneeling to say people's stories that have been, you know, their lives have been taken, and telling their stories, and throughout history, how wrong these people, what they were doing when they gave their life, and how wrongly they were taken away from our lives. And so we've been kneeling for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And it has been a very profound movement. It's been going on here for almost 6 months now. And we're really working on continuing it with changes to lesson plans. And, there's so much going on. And as for myself, I finally figured out a way to communicate this movement to people that don't understand it, that might want to move away from it. And when I put a cookie in a cookie box and it said, say their names. And we've been shouting their names, but someone came in, and actually today, and they said, say their names, and I could hear them, and they didn't quite get it. It's in a holiday cookie box. And I said, yeah, I wanted to bring people an awareness of good things that have happened. So this cookie has made it into the cookie boxes, because equality, we're hoping, will come for all. And this is going in as a good thing. I've had people on both sides that have said to my workers, my assistants, you should quit. I'm not going to buy that cookie. What, that shouldn't even be allowed. And I was, and this person was a friend of, well, is a friend of mine, but we need to bring these people around. And, it's, if they understand the stories, the heartbreaking stories of the people that have passed for no little to no reason for the longest time, then they would listen. And it's not to be feared. It's to be studied. It's to be talked about. And it's to be brought forward and carried with us. I have here on the vineyard with my tribe, it's very hard because I haven't seen any other members of our community out to do this. And I just think that shows how traumatized we are. And I've been out there working with reparations groups and trying to allow people to work on speaking, work on our voices instead of hiding and fearing the emotions that this brings up, because we are very sensitive people. And it's very hard. And I actually, I think all the time, man, I'm gonna need some therapy because it's a lot. Yeah. And we have a big responsibility moving forward.
Well, Julie, I just got to tell you, I had a chance to participate in one of the vigils for 846 in Chilmark.
Oh, nice.
About 3 weekends or 4 weekends ago. I couldn't believe when I heard about it that you all at that point have been every day at 10:30 at the, as I recall, the public library there.
Yes.
Kneeling for 846 and having speakers and what have you. So even though you are ending your vigils, I want you to know that we have been inspired here in Falmouth, because now a group of clergy and the No Place for Hate group here in Falmouth is now meeting every Sunday. It's not every day, but every Sunday at noon for a vigil, kneeling for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And that was inspired by what I saw being done in Chilmark.
Yes.
Okay.
I love that.
That's encouraging. That's absolutely encouraging.
Your work, your efforts have had a ripple effect.
Yes.
So Angie, I think we better go to our second question, because we could continue on this.
We could go on forever.
Right. So
yeah.
What you want to introduce us to the second question?
Yes, so our second question is, how should we locally in the Commonwealth and across the nation best acknowledge and celebrate the accomplishments of Indigenous people? So we'll hear a few things from the people on the street, and then we'll come back to discuss.
It's hard for me to act like what I have to say about that matters very much. I think if you're trying to amend a situation, obviously we'll never fully amend what happened to Indigenous peoples when white settlers came here, or white settlers did to Africans. But if you're trying to amend such intense injustices as those, I think that really has to start with listening to the voices of those communities when they're telling you how to do it. So I think if we're looking for ways to figure out, okay, how do we celebrate and acknowledge Indigenous communities, I think item A has to be to just listen more intently when those voices are telling us what they need and what they think should be celebrated and where we're coming short.
So I think, first off, we have to recognize that we're on unceded land. The transition to how this area came to be was not as smooth as we were led to believe as children, and what we may have heard in the past. We live in a time where technology is literally at our fingertips, and we can look these things up. I think it's imperative that we read and learn the true history of Thanksgiving. I also think that we should discontinue this romanticized tale of Thanksgiving, and learn our true history, learn the true history of Thanksgiving, and not just what we've seen on the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving specials.
So we've just heard from a couple people on the street, and one thing I thought was interesting was one of the gentlemen mentioned unceded land, that we are on unceded land. And I know that I've seen recently an interest in people making land acknowledgements. So whether that be in their emails saying that the place of my work is on unceded territory of name of Indigenous tribe, or I know at one point in Woods Hole we were doing pretty good on, at the beginning of any of our events, acknowledging that we were on unceded Wampanoag territory. And I have to admit that at some point we forgot and just didn't do it. So I'd like to hear a little bit about your thoughts on the acknowledgement and what it would actually mean to acknowledge that we are on unceded territory, rather than just saying that we are on unceded territory. What would that mean?
I think it honors our ancestors, honors the people that are still here, honors their contributions. It's respectful more and more to any kind of gathering, whether it be online or the different conferences I go to. There is typically an acknowledgement of the native or indigenous people whose land we occupy at that particular moment. And that's how we begin a particular meeting or conference. And I think that is just a way of honoring and respecting those who came first.
Do we think that it's something that we should encourage more groups to do? Encourage people to think about and to acknowledge in, like you said, in every aspect of life?
One more thing is, yes, as I've gone to a couple of meetings with the local school districts, and they've both begun doing the land acknowledgement at the beginning of the opening of meetings. And I find that very, very encouraging. And they actually have a picture of some beautiful areas with a welcoming in Wampanoag language. And I think that's a wonderful tradition to begin, both with Mashpee Public Schools and Falmouth Public Schools are beginning that process.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. Talia, did you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's just even acknowledging it, the acknowledgement of it is a great start for people in general, organizations and all that. But I think it does push a little bit further in really educating yourself about those people of those lands, because I think in whole it would actually benefit everybody to learn more about the Indigenous people of the lands that they occupy, because it might help them figure out more about themselves and have self-awareness, and just for the land that they're living in, and what sort of history had to take place for them to even be able to be there. But I definitely do think it's a great start, because for so long, I think natives, or even native history in general, has just been pushed aside because it's so traumatic, and there's a lot of bad stuff that did happen that, you know, colonizers didn't want to acknowledge or really admit, because it was either their ancestors and it wasn't them per se. And so I do think it is actually a great start, but there is definitely more than acknowledgement to push us further into, I think, where we need to be in order to make a better society, is in order for us to be able to understand each other. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So, go ahead, Julie.
No, I think Talia is definitely on the right track there. It's about recognizing that this is an initial awareness, and that there's further, questions to be asked about how do we heal the wounds and how do we recognize further, always. So yeah, this is just the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely the acknowledgement, and then, as you mentioned, educating and understanding the people whose land that we're on. So it leads me to wonder, I'm currently reading a book called This Land is Their Land, written by David Silverman, and he says he's a white man. And it's an incredibly interesting and book full of just knowledge, just so much knowledge that I had no idea about. But I also feel a bit conflicted that the story of the Wampanoags is told by someone who is not a member of the tribe. But at the same time, is it appropriate for me to want the Wampanoag tribe members to relive their trauma for my education? And I think about this also in the context as being a person of color on the Cape in general. There's some of us, but I am like the only Black friend who I know many of my white friends here. And so I know I feel bogged down when they want to constantly ask me about my experience as a person of color, specifically a Black person. And so while I do feel sometimes I want to educate them, I want to give them my perspective, I'm also tired, and I'm like, there's things you can read about this. So I guess my question or my thought that I'd like to present is, what is the balance between learning about an Indigenous culture directly from the Indigenous people? Like, how appropriate is that versus reading historical books or watching historical documentaries that were not produced by Native people?
I think these are responsibilities. You know, if we do not allow people to digest the materials that people like David Silberman are putting in print, and it's really, I think he's done some justice for us, since it was not written, to write about our history as a professor at George Washington University. And I think that the people in our communities who are wanting to carry and educate themselves and educate others in important ways along with us is an important tool about where we want this to go to. And finding that balance is so important, because I really believe that we're storytellers, but we're not writers, or we're not, we just don't have often the platform, and that he used his platform to create an awareness. And I don't think he's doing it in a way that he's bringing the light to himself. I think that he is carrying it alongside of the Wampanoag people. So that's interesting. And we say it differently because we have different accents on our Wampanoag.
That I was actually about to ask that because I realized you seem to pronounce the A in the Wampanoag.
Yes.
So is it
So
actually correct to say it both ways, or am I
It
actually
is.
saying it wrong?
it is. There are many points in our language that the dialect is slightly different, and that's
Okay.
the difference. It actually is a marker as to where we're from, whether we're from Mashpee or whether we're from Martha's Vineyard. So it's really kind of cool.
Interesting. So it seems like almost someone with like a Southern accent versus somebody from New York type thing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But a little bit, I did want to comment on what you were saying, because I understand kind of like the pressures and stuff when people ask like, oh, what do you feel? Because we get that all the time, especially during Thanksgiving or Columbus Day. I think one way to approach it, or that we could kind of be conscious about it, is not always picking those specific times to ask either Native people or Black people, wait until February to ask them of certain histories or stuff like that. Like, we're here all year round like everybody else. Like, you can ask it in the midst of summer, you can ask it during other occasions that we're doing, rather than like bombarding us all in this 1 month, because then we're just exhausted. And it's hard because we have this like obligation to ourselves and our ancestors to educate people, but then we're exhausted at the same time. So, and then you get a sort of like resentment, because it's like, why are you asking me now? Why can't you ask me in a couple months when I'm not so tired, or when the holidays aren't gone? Because guess what? We all, might celebrate Christmas too, where we're getting presents and doing this and doing that, because we're all Americans. So it's just, I think it's like a conscious effort from everybody. Like I'm grateful for the people that want to be educated, but I just wish that it was more genuine, where it came from, a general understanding, and not just around this time, because that it might not be politically correct or what,
Yeah. Well, now I feel bad that we decided to do this week.
I was going to say, hey, so we're guilty too, right?
As an educator, I find that our students are often put in that role when a topic comes up that relates to Native Americans or Indigenous people. Suddenly they find themselves in the spotlight. Well, what do you think? As if they represent every single tribal member of all 570 plus tribes. So I think that's why, as an educator, I think it's important that we embed Native perspectives throughout the year, and not just have American Indian Month or something like that. It's embedded throughout the curriculum. And so students see themselves in the curriculum, and it becomes more of a natural conversation within the context of what they're studying, and not singled out as a representative of every group in the country, every tribe. But I find students often will share that. They felt so uncomfortable because they were asked to represent, American Indians as such.
Yeah,
Jerry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rev.
I'd say that, and that's why I've more recently begun to turn down invitations to speak at places during Black History Month for the same reason, right? As Talia was saying, and Julie and you as well. I'm around, the other 11 months as well. So, reach out to me then. So we're getting close to the end of our time, but I wanted to get your reactions to one comment that one of our on the street persons made, and that was, he said that we are never going to fully rectify what was done to Indigenous and Black peoples, I think he said, in response to the question, what should we be doing? How can we acknowledge what was done and celebrate the contributions of Indigenous peoples? So are we ever going to be able to rectify it? And how do you think we, aside from the education you've been talking about, how else do we rectify it?
We have to. We have to. This is what this movement is about. We bring equality, I cannot say it. We can rectify it by bringing our people into the light in every single industry, in every single, if there's a Native person and they're a chef, then let's see what they're about. Let's give opportunity to the people that has not even today been given. Recognition through Native artists, in artistry, in stories, in just talking about it. We can for both Indigenous and Black cultures bring a light, and we can, if we try, if we educate in the right way, in positive lights. We must, because this will not stop, and this is not going to go away until we have equality.
Well said. And I think it's important that a Native American or an Indigenous worldview is important to understand our contributions to science, for example, to understand from everything from the design of our homes to our connection to everything in the world. Everything in the world. We live in a web, and you cannot dissect or isolate any part of that web without affecting the whole. And I think more and more Western scientists are starting to realize that they're coming to that Native perspective of things. And I think the respect that we are one with nature, we are one with the seasons, and we are one in the big picture. So hopefully that will go a long way towards understanding.
Yeah, we can't undo what has been done in history, but we can definitely kind of rectify by just doing better and by being better and by bringing equality out and being the norm and educating, American society about the Indigenous people of this land, and then also the historical happenings that happened within forming America to every society or every race that has come into this land and still happens to. So I think that's the way that we rectify, I guess, what has been done, but also be morally conscious as well when it comes into whether it be land suits or situations, especially to do with land or resources, that we're handling them the right way, or the people in power are making the right decisions that will sort of rectify the things that have been done, or actually being morally conscious of those things. And also just like Julie was saying, with putting Indigenous people to light, even though people are Indigenous or Native Americans are busy during Thanksgiving, there are plenty that own businesses that you can be buying from them. You could buy corn or rice and to be a part of your Thanksgiving meal and incorporate it into your Thanksgiving tradition that will actually celebrate and acknowledge Native people and that they're still here and still thriving, and also acknowledge the fact of what they had to sacrifice in order for you and your ancestors to be here.
Wow, that was very beautifully said. I really like the idea of incorporating Indigenous and Native work and businesses into our traditions, whatever our tradition may be. I think that is an excellent idea. So I think that is a great note to end on. I want to thank each of you, Jerry, Talia, Judy, for being here with us. This is the kind of conversation that we want to continue, and we really hope that those watching will continue these conversations, not just this month, but throughout the year. And even we have some work to do. We also have to think about when we decide to have these conversations and how they may be affecting people in their lives. So thank you all. Thank you to Deb and Alan from FCTV specifically for helping us create this show, for making it happen. And we look forward to seeing you on the next conversation.
Tapatosh.